Hello, everyone. Welcome back to coverage of SCGCON Cincinnati Team Trios today. That means we've got Legacy, Modern, and Pioneer. My name is Chris Casterapple. With me is Tim Schultz. Tim, how you doing?
I am doing great. I caught the first 4 rounds of coverage, and it has been fantastic so far. Team Trios is my absolute favorite way to play Magic, so I am thrilled to get to join you in the booth to do some coverage today.
Yeah, I'm very excited. What have you been excited by today? What has stood out to you so far? I caught some of coverage, but it was a beautiful Saturday morning, so I did go out and get some hiking done by the river today. So I missed a little bit, but I'm sure you'll catch us up.
We've had some really fantastic matchups. The tournament winning deck of the last large Legacy tournament, Cephalid Breakfast, made a showing, and it was the Orange Chant version, which kind of makes me happy. I think that deck is incredibly well positioned with the meta. It's got a really nice control and combo finish, and it does also play. Uh, I'll think of it in a minute. Makes a 1/1 token, draw some cards. Fantastic.
Oh, Staff of the Storyteller, yeah.
Thank you. I mean, the staff has been a really big all-star in comparison, filling the slot of Stoneforge Mystic. So instead of going for the aggro juke, it plays an extra card advantage draw engine with a little bit of chip shots. So getting to see that one was fun. And the hand cams on Doomsday gave me a perspective I haven't had before. I'm not normally in the Doomsday seat. That's a pretty complicated deck. So getting the hand cams, Anu, fantastic job on that, giving us in chat a much better perspective.
Yeah, the times I've played against Doomsday, in the opponent's seat, you sit there and, 3 minutes later, you're just like, I'm probably dead after they have exiled their library except for 5 cards, and you're just like waiting to see how they did it. I do appreciate seeing the actual process of picking out the cards that they need one at a time.
Yeah.
Staff of the Storyteller as well, a card that like made a pretty big initial splash and then kind of faded away as it you know as legacy players kind of felt it out and realized like, no, this is really a role player, not an omnipresent card that needs to be like the card advantage engine in a ton of different decks. And it makes sense as a way of like continuing to get cards in your combo deck, and it's a little slow, a little pokey, and doesn't quite generate the type of value that you need when you're playing like actual value-based games in Legacy. But having a combo backing it up, I think is really nice. Kind of playing a pseudo Urza's Saga type role in some of those decks, and I think that's a good fit for it.
Definitely. I've seen some interesting combos. Shark Typhoon, Urza Saga pair very nicely with it. Most recently, I've seen it paired alongside of Elminster, the Planeswalker, the 5-drop,
Oh my
which
goodness.
it does not work as well as I was expecting it to, being as it does only give you one counter, even if you do exile out a Force of Will. But it does look like we have our players on table. So we'll turn over.
Yes, looks like we've got Drew Kobus on Abzan Depths versus John Hada on Rakdos Painter. Can you tell us a little bit about this matchup? I haven't seen so much Abzan Depths lately, but excited to see some of this like combo-y mid-range version of the land combo in Legacy. Has not been super popular as far as I've seen in the Legacy coverage recently.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of it. My guess that it's going to be a little bit more on the green-white depth splash Bowmaster than it is on the Abzan Maverick side, just based off of the name. But we'll see kind of what we've got there. If that is the case, I feel like that deck is going to be fairly favored. But if we're looking at more of a Abzan Maverick deck straight up, Painter might have the tools to get ahead there. So the red-black Painter deck is kind of interesting because it's going to be different than what you typically see on um, online coverage, because it plays the card from uh, the Warhammer set, Chaos Defiler.
Yes, a 5-drop, 3 black and a red, perhaps the only card with that particular mana cost that's playable in Legacy. But this is kind of a monster of a card, a 5 mana 5/4 that basically vindicates a permanent coming in and going out if you've only got 2 players in your game. or vindicates a non-land permanent rather, but a really powerful effect. And with all of the ancient tombs and other fast mana in the Rakdos Painter deck, that 5 mana cost is not quite as steep as we see here. A turn 1 Fable of the Mirror Breaker on John Hada's side, facing down the turn 1 Green Sun Zenith for Dryad Arbor. So kind of the fastest starts that each of these decks can really put out.
Definitely. The Fable of the Mirror Breaker is an excellent enabler with the 8 Welder package, being able to, bin a couple of your artifacts, the Chaos Defiler or the like, getting either part of your combo is pretty strong. This card is good, as those of us who have played Pioneer do know.
Absolutely. And yeah, a card that took a little bit to catch on, but now we see it getting played in every format up to and including Legacy, as Drew Corbus cracks a Wasteland to take out the Ancient Tomb. Pretty traditional weakness of the Soul Land type decks is getting your lands getting your lands wastelanded and then having a handful of like 4 drops plus. Doesn't look like John has that problem right now. A few basics in his hand, and I'm not sure. Maybe a Fury. I'm not sure what else he's got going on there. Oh, discarded a couple of lands to Fable.
No, that makes sense. Those treasures will catch him right back up on mana. Oh, and we do see the Fury here right away.
Yeah, that's very powerful versus this Dryad Arbor Elvish Reclaimer. Start binning both of those, and that, whenever you get to Fury 2 creatures and you're at card parity and mana advantage in that exchange, you really feel like you got away with something there.
Yeah, that was a pretty gross exchange right there. Abzan Depth's feeling a little bit behind now.
I mean, Drew's board is a single land, just a bayou in play versus a goblin that is going ham, attacking, making treasures, ramping John up to some of those powerful cards as we see Goblin Engineer coming down. What's John probably going to get here?
It'll either be the Chaos Defiler or the Phyrexian Dragon Engine, in my opinion. I didn't see another part of the combo in his hand, and it does look like just a basic mountain. So I'd expect to see one of the card advantage engines in Phyrexian Dragon Engine or the Chaos Defiler with an empty board state. My bet is the Dragon Engine, but we'll see here.
And just look at what John's able to do with this like relatively limit. He's got Goblin Engineer and then Fable and the stuff that Fable creates. And the Goblin can make treasures that the Engineer can sacrifice to bring artifacts back from the graveyard. Once the reflection flips and it starts copying Goblin Engineer, that's going to assemble the combo. Just a really nice, tight package of synergies here. Drew plays. I can't quite see what that land is. I don't know if that's a Caracas or my screen is a little bit blurry, unfortunately.
I'm thinking that's Flagstones of Trokir.
You're right. Absolutely.
So I like where John Hada is right now. I feel like a very commanding presence, especially with the ability to get that Phyrexian Dragon Engine. Oh. So if he attacks with the Goblin, makes a treasure, he's able to pull back that Phyrexian Dragon Engine, which reads only when it does return from the graveyard. You may discard your hand and draw 3 cards. So Ancestral Recall here feels very good, but it did look like he was interested in casting that card, so we'll see what it is.
Yeah, hard to turn down 3 cards, even kind of no matter what this is here. Drew passing the turn here, representing crop rotation, perhaps. I'm not sure what else this could indicate. No end of turn crop rotation though, so not quite setting up a combo. Depths is never quite out of it. You can always like kind of trip your way into a 2020, and if you forget about that happening, then you may just get attacked for 20. But I'm sure John is going to be pretty aware of that, and doesn't look like Drew's doing much here, using an endurance to keep John from putting together that dragon engine.
The other card in hand appears to have either been Goblin Welder or a second copy of Goblin Engineer. So the Endurance had a lot more staying power than just denying those 3 cards there, so good on Drew. But when your pitch cast Endurance is still putting you behind. John Hada's now actually putting together enough power that Drew has to start being concerned about his life total.
Yeah, and this reflection is now flipped and over at summoning sickness, which means it can keep copying that goblin engineer, or just create more treasure tokens by copying the goblin token. Really, the world is a little bit John's oyster here. Just has to keep in mind the possibility that, you know, Dark Depths gets crop rotation 4 and a thespian stage hits, and then there's a 2020, and just don't let that happen. But I don't think Drew has very many cards left in hand now.
No, indeed. And here is the Goblin Welder, which means that with with the Goblin in hand and the copy of Kiki, John actually has the combo as well as the damage for next turn. So that was a
Yeah.
pretty good showing there for John.
Yeah, I think Drew tripped pretty hard on lands there. Spent that wasteland to take out the Ancient Tomb, which is something you feel like you have to do against the Painter deck because of the power of their cards once they've unlocked their mana. But even one activation of Ancient Tomb often starts getting you there, as we saw that turn 1 Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which is, I mean, that's quick. And it really was the Fable that just did a ton of work there. Cleaning up John's hand, making a bunch of mana, and then just threatening like, hey, now that I have this reflection up, I have the combo.
Definitely. With the Green Sun Zenith package, I did see a Collector Oof being slid in from the sideboard over there for Drew. Collector Oof really good against the mono red artifacts deck.
Yeah. Although, I mean, Collector doing a good job against a lot of the non-artifact cards, especially like turning off treasure tokens from Fable. It's funny when you look at these painter lists. They actually only run something like 7 artifacts, and then the dragon engine, and maybe like a couple of artifact creatures. But there's not like a million artifacts in the deck, even though it is a pretty artifact based combo. That said, Collector Oof turning off Grindstone, turning off treasure tokens is certainly going to do some work here.
Definitely. And I hope that we see Drew keep in enough removal. One of the shifts we've seen recent is a transition from Blood Moon to Magus of the Moon in the sideboards of these painter decks. So if we do see Magus of the Moon come in, it would behoove Drew to keep in those additional copies of Swords to Plowshares. So
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a switch to Magus of the Moon over Blood Moon is, indicating obviously that we're more worried about disenchant effects, things like Force of Vigor, over just like the card Lightning Bolt. Magus of the Moon, not really a card you can bring in against stuff like the Grixis Delver deck, even though that is a deck that can be pretty vulnerable to a Moon. You can't really afford to play a 3-mana card and have it just die to Lightning Bolt. But less relevant in this matchup, not a lot of lightning bolts in the Abzan Depths deck.
no, hopefully not.
So in the sideboarded game, what kind of hand Drew is going to be on the play? He's going to kind of be the aggressor here. What kind of hand is he looking for? What's he going to be trying to mulligan towards?
I think he's going to try and keep a similar start to last game. I mean, if you look at the matchup on paper, you say, "Oh, my Abzan Depths hand kept a turn 1 Green Sun for Dryad Arbor with Endurance against the Painter deck." I'm feeling pretty favored there. I think that Drew's going to be looking for either some additional disruption or a little bit of a faster clock. So if you go turn 1 Reclaimer into a turn 3 combo, that might be where Drew's trying to get. John, it does not look like he's got anything with the exception of the one sideboard ensnaring bridge. And if you can force your opponent to bring out the ensnaring bridge, then either with your sideboard Force of Vigors, you might be able to force your way through a quick Merit Lage.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, a really good reason to have Magus of the Moon over a Blood Moon in your deck. If the rest of your deck encourages your opponent to bring in those forces of vigor, then maybe you can get them with your Magus that doesn't die to the same thing. Pretty big travesty to have another artifact or enchantment out, play a 3-mana Blood Moon, and then your opponent just pitches a card to force kills them both and then moves on with their life.
Especially with, I'm going to call it the new interaction between Blood Moon, Magus effects, and Dark Depths, where, okay, here we go. Turn 1 Mox and Reclaimer. So mana acceleration and the tutorable targets. So this looks like a pretty strong start from Drew. And Mountain Pass. So a little bit disparity between game 1 and game 2 here from John.
Yeah. Big difference between turn 1 Fable of the Mirror Breaker and turn 1 Mountain Go. But yeah, as you were about to say, Blood Moon allowing Dark Depths to come into play with no counters, and then if the Blood Moon dies, then that just turns into a 20/20. Maybe a 2-year-old interaction at this point, but time has very little meaning, especially in this post-COVID world. A scary proposition for the Blood Moon player against the Dark Depths deck. John Hada going to cast a turn 2 Goblin Engineer, going to kind of start the. I don't know, mate. Do you think he's going to be aiming directly for the combo here? What's the plan on the draw here? That's an ensnaring bridge into the graveyard, I believe.
It is a stronghold art too. So John's got great tastes. Looks like sketch art and stronghold. So one of the fun parts about Paper, especially in Legacy, is people put together these decks and they are beautifully constructed. You don't get a whole lot of land box basics. Everybody cares.
Yes, definitely part of the experience of the Legacy tournament. That Ensnaring Bridge hits the graveyard because John knows that with this turn 1 Mox Diamond Elvish Reclaimer start, Drew is just threatening a very, very quick 20/20, and the first order of business is stop that Merit Lage from killing you here. And Drew does cast an end of turn crop rotation, sacrificing a Flagstones, going to pull a Thespian Stage out of his deck, and very close to assembling things here with that. Elvish Reclaimer certainly indicates the ability to grab that Dark Depths anytime that he wants, although may not be able to put the 20/20 into play this turn.
Correct. And missing the second land drop, I was a little bit nervous, but the nice sequencing between crop rotation into Flagstones, sacrifice Flagstones to Reclaimer, does catch up on that missed land drop. Ooh.
Yeah, we did see a lot of Flagstones and Reclaimers for the brief period that Field of the Dead was legal in Modern. That was a whole like sub archetype in that format. Not as common in Legacy, but pretty powerful, just going up cards and allowing you to threaten your combo while also being pretty efficient card wise here. Is this a grist on the table here?
I'm gonna with an insect token for sure. Yes.
Yeah, this is a grist. Well, I do apologize. Our feed is just a little bit pixelated, but I'm pretty good at guessing by the tap in 3 lands, put a card in the graveyard, put a planeswalker into play, and now with the insect confirmed that is a grist.
Yeah, sketch art on that. I do love the sketch art, but I'm trying to look at it. I'm like, maybe it's a Gideon, and so
Painter Servant in play for John. That's going to turn on any blasts, any Pyroblasts or Red Elemental Blasts that he's still got in his deck. I don't know how many of those tend to come out post-board. We do see a Magus of the Moon in John's hand here. I don't know. Where do you think he goes with this Painter Servant here? What does that play indicate? Is that just something to put the Ensnaring Bridge into play if Merit Lage comes into play this turn?
well, this is threatening the combo. This Urza Saga is going to tick off. You can float the 1 and activate Grindstone. So you're threatening lethal here with the Painter's Grindstone combo.
Very, very relevant. And Drew, was with casting that grist that turn was not making a 20/20. And so unless he has something like Rite of Consumption or something that is very much not in his deck, not going to be able to threaten lethal before this combo happens. So he's going to have to stop this somehow.
Yeah, the grist here I think is killing the Painter Servant,
Yep.
so we should see that go away.
And
Which
he bogs John first, so John isn't able to swap the Painter Servant for the Ensnaring Bridge in the graveyard, but now there is a Painter Servant in the graveyard.
there is and a Magus in hand, so this is a big turn from John. One red card I can't see. It looks old bordered, which I would have sworn was a red elemental blast.
Yeah, less relevant against the Abzan deck whenever Painter Servant is not in play. But John has 1 mana floating from that Urza Saga, grabs the Grindstone. Painter Servant is in the graveyard, pretty close to assembling that combo. If he can get an artifact in play and sacrifice it to this Goblin Engineer and still have those 3 mana, then that is, a kill right now, barring interaction from Drew.
Oh, second Painter in hand.
And Mox Opal is the additional mana that he needs to activate the Grindstone.
Yep, so if this comes in and turns on Metalcraft, there's the 3 mana back.
And casting the Mox Opal first keeps Drew from being able to Force of Vigor in response to, if John had cast the Painter first, then Drew would have been able to Force of Vigor and like take out the Grindstone and the Painter Servant in response to the 3rd mana that John needs for the combo. So by playing the Mox Opal first, he gives himself a few more options. Force of Vigor, if Drew is kind of patient with it, can break up the combo, but remember, Force can only be cast for free on your opponent's turn. So John may pass the turn here with 3 mana available to activate Grindstone. Although now Drew does have the ability to pay 4 mana to cast Force. So we've got a little bit of a dance here. Probably John considering the possibility of Force of Vigor and trying to make sure that he doesn't just get, both pieces of his combo destroyed in response to trying to combo. So he's going to go ahead and do it on upkeep. If Drew has the Force, he can cast it here. He does not.
Yeah, both Force and Endurance looking good. John taking a look. And Endurance the cast. All right.
Yeah, Endurance the cast, so Drew will not die to Library Out, as we refer to it now, thanks to Tybalt of Red Sub. And with that Grist in play, he's going to be able to kill that Painter Servant again. But that Goblin Engineer is just still here, ready to get it back. So a lot of problems for Drew to solve.
Yeah. The interesting portion here is that with the Endurance coming in and shuffling the graveyard, the land sacrificed from Elvish Reclaimer last turn was the Bajuka Bog. So Bog is back on the table if we can get another mana source here.
Yeah, and I think that's, well, in that Wasteland, taking out Urza Saga, which is going to constrict John's mana a little bit. But Drew is not going to be able to put together, unless he's got something that we don't know about. He's not going to be able to put together, kill that Painter Servant, exile your graveyard.
That's an interesting line. The sacrifice Endurance, kill Painter at least buys you an extra turn. The card I had mistaken for Red Elemental Blast was a Blood Moon, so it's possible that we no longer have mana to play.
Well, I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, John just has the combo here still in play, not broken up. Drew's going to need, another Endurance. Yeah, he has another Endurance. Does need to pitch a card for it.
It looks like he's announcing it on his upkeep.
Okay, just casting it on his upkeep, sure. But these are really just buying time, you know, and the fact that it cost him 3 mana. No, okay, he pitched a Green Sun's Zenith for it. But looks like the players are backing up a little bit, trying to make sure that things are clearly communicated. That okay, hard cast it on upkeep for 3 mana is I think what we have ended up on here, and
Yeah.
that leaves Drew with no mana again. Is gonna have to use this grist to try to break apart this combo, but I'm not sure that that's gonna do it.
With the Goblin Molder being found last turn, the additional 1 mana tax for the Goblin Engineer is no longer relevant. So with Wasteland Mox and Green Sun Zenith in hand, don't know that there's anything that Drew can do to get out of this at this point.
No, I think, the best, because of the redundancy too of the welder and the engineer, the best you can hope for is, kill that painter servant, exile the graveyard, but I don't believe we have that line available to us here. Yep, painter's dead. But barring further interaction, everything's kind of lined up here.
Yeah, those two Wastelands didn't accomplish reducing John's total mana to less than 3. So
Right.
I'm curious if keeping those in play to hold up the Reclaimer activation would have been a different line that Drew could take, having the information we do in Booth, knowing hands, and past history.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, the just ability to keep recurring this painter servant is kind of brutal, and Drew being forced to use those endurances on himself just to live rather than getting rid of John's graveyard, which is a source, continuing source of a recurring headache for Drew. That's pretty costly. Those endurances not really doing what he, I think, was hoping that they would do this game. I mean, don't get me wrong, keeping you from dying is a great comes into play ability, but
It is,
you
and
know,
I've been spouting off, and chat just does point out that there is no Metalcraft. That Mox Diamond or that Mox
oh,
Opal is turned off.
you're
So
right.
the third mana for John is currently missing. So
Right, you're
those
right. Losing that
wastelands,
painter lost a mana for sure.
those wastelands did do good work on Drew. So Drew able to find the line, thread the needle.
So another Mox Diamond. Drew has, a bit of mana now, but still not really enough to make a 2020 this turn.
No, not enough to make the 2020, but enough to sacrifice and keep a bog up in case there's
Yep.
an exchange. Now, John would be able to activate the non-redundant, or I guess the redundant goblin to keep that out. And Drew not
But with
opting to do
only with only 2 artifacts though, that's a little tough, he's not going to be able you don't want to sacrifice your grindstone to bring your painter servant back. That doesn't accomplish that much. That reclaimer attacking though, getting in some damage, but not going to be able to hold up a bog. Green Sun Zenith for 2.
coming in for a collector roof, I'm assuming.
That seems pretty likely.
Ooh.
And Drew may have successfully navigated this. John just not quite drawing enough mana. Those wastelands keeping him just under the threshold of what he needed. Gonna swap a Mox Opal for a Painter's Servant. And if that is a blast in hand, that will kill a Collector Oof.
Ooh,
Oh,
interesting.
it's two moon effects. It's a blood moon and a magus of the moon. That is a
Outland
an Outland
Liberator.
Liberator, which has a disenchant effect attached to it. So it can sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Uh, yeah, pretty difficult to combo through that.
Yeah, it's the new Quasali Pride Mage. The back half is incredibly powerful, where on attack, it triggers and destroys target artifact or enchantment as well. So if oop, oop, oop.
John draws Fury for turn, which is going to let him use one of those moon effects that have not been relevant at all this game because he just hasn't had the mana to cast them. Uh, Fury much less powerful on this board than the last time we saw it cast. We'll take out the Outland Liberator, but Outland Liberator gets to kill something. But with the two goblins in play, disenchanting just to disenchant doesn't do that much. We get to exchange a painter for a painter, keep threatening the combo as soon as John hits his third mana.
With the requisite number of lands, John is now looking down 6 damage. So this is a chump blocking engineer here.
Yeah, very tight margins in this game. And we see John with that Dragon Engine in hand, just the worst zone for the Dragon Engine to be in.
Yeah,
Drew a removal spell away from dealing lethal this turn, but not a lot of point removal spells. And I think the a swords to plowshares here would do it. And so without being able to deal lethal is only going to attack with the endurance and is going to hold Elvish Reclaimer up.
so John with a choice here to chump or not. This does turn off Ancient Tomb as a top deck for John. So we'll see how many of those extra turn time walk endurance is held up.
Now, if John just draws a land here, does holding up this Elvish Reclaimer do anything to disrupt the combo? I don't believe so.
There is play. It does remove some opportunities. Putting the grindstone trigger on the stack and sacking back for a
Sure.
painter is a relatively common line to where you sacrifice your one artifact, being the grindstone, to recur the painter. But with the painter in play, I don't know that it's relevant. I guess the weight of holding up the chump blocker. I'm not sure, but Drew's been right about a couple of things that I was mistaken about. So we'll see what plans are here. And without another mana source here again for John, it looks like we're in
Yeah,
chump block mode.
just a handful of 3 drops, not an Ancient Tomb or Lotus Petal in sight. Not only a handful of 3 drops, but a combo in play that costs 3 mana to kill your opponent. Uh, John just wants a land on top of that library, and it is not showing up.
And I believe that life totals are incorrect here, with John having taken that hit from the endurance should be at 2 here.
I believe you're right. And Drew just going to go grab another wasteland is going to get John even farther away and going to attack with both reclaimers, the endurance, and an insect. And so John just going to have to block with everything, cycle that painter in and out of the graveyard, and gets wastelanded here. And if he is at 2, then yeah, Ancient Tomb is not a draw that's going to allow this combo to happen.
I mean, there are a couple of City of Traders splashed around in many decks. A City of Traders would be a oh,
Yeah, looks like we did not draw a double mana source for that turn. Combo in play for a number of turns that game. Very, very well navigated. Just keeping John off of that mana and unable to finish the game off. 2 endurances to put that library back, put all the cards in the graveyard back into the library, just hanging on. Super, super tight game. Very well played. Impressive stuff.